Orson, he's such a titanic figure. There's been as much written about him perhaps as Gandhi. But yet he is a figure where you have these two, I would say generally speaking, school of thoughts that he was prevented in the latter part of his career from making movies by the powers that be because he was iconoclast or whatever. And then there is the other school of thought that although it certainly was a genius, there was a strain of perhaps self-destructiveness where he was his own worst enemy. What your experience with Orson on a personal and a professional basis, what was he like and where do you come down on either side of that discussion?
I will answer your question specifically in a moment, but maybe this will be something that will color everything. At one point, I was represented by MCA, and they thought I should have a position as a producer at RKO, and I was brought over to see Ben Kahane, who was the top executive there, who had been there when Orson had been there. And he had my record of what I've done on his desk as I came into the office with my agent. And we had the usual amenities, how do you do, and so forth, nice to see you. And then he looked at my record, and he'd seen I'd worked with Orson in 2 plays, and also I'd done a recording with him. And he looked at me and he said, Orson Welles, eh? A little rich for our blood. And I knew I was out the door before I hardly sat down. That was it. The identification with Orson mitigated against me right there. He just felt that I would break every budget that was submitted, I guess. My own experience with Orson was on the highest level. I've had the great opportunity of working with extraordinary directors. With Chaplin, with Hitchcock, with Jean Renoir, with Orson, and some modern day fellows like Peter Weir, Martin Scorsese, and so on. Each of these persons whom I have mentioned was special, each was individual, each was not like the other. The reason these fellows whom I mentioned are looked upon as giants, separated from the other directors, all the other directors in the business, is because each had a story to tell. His own story, which he put into whatever story or whatever script was given him. And this is what separated the men from the boys. What was his story? With Chaplin, it was the immigrant. With Hitchcock, it was England. The way everything he shot reflected England, plus all the curious identifications he had of irony, humor, and romance, all mixed together. With Renoir was France, and a certain feeling about the human race, his humanity, was extraordinary. With Orson, it was a theatricality. He saw things in the most theatrical way, than even just saying hello to you. The last time I saw Orson was at the last evening of 5 days of the Directors Guild devoted to his career. And when we saw each other, having not seen each other in a long time, he embraced me, pulled me to his chest, and whispered in my ear, You son of a bitch. He had good reason. Now, so you asked how I felt about him. He was extraordinary. I mean, you know, he and my most successful endeavor with him was in Julius Caesar, where I played Sin of the Poet. Now, when we started into that scene, Orson and I disagreed on who Sin of the Poet was. He saw him as one way, I saw him as another way. We argued that, actually, sitting in the second row of the orchestra of the theater. And finally, at the end, he said, okay, that's it. You do it your way. But then, he staged it in such a way that, despite one's own performance, the combination of how he staged that scene and made it so immediate to an audience was characteristic of his greatness as a director. And this was his thing as a director. Because, you know, until Orson came along, the directors were great stage managers. They could move actors around the stage very well. But what Orson did is he surrounded you in the theater. Not only the acting, with the text, with the sound, with the music, and the lights. And he did all of that, and you were absolutely enthralled and surrounded by the experience of watching that play. And then, of course, when he came into films, he had it in films too. He had it in Cain, he had it in Touch of Evil. Everything he touched had a theatricality that absolutely mesmerized you in the audience. Now, this town found that he was perhaps too expensive and it didn't fit in, but that was part of the contradiction. You mentioned self-destruction, he had that too. He had within him a thing of not finishing things, and you know, when we were doing the Mercury, these were very poor days. This was 1937, depths of the Depression. Orson would go out of the theater by way of the box office after the show and dip into the box office receipts and grab a handful of stuff and put them in his pocket and then go to a nightclub. You could tell he used to drink, go to 21 Club. After a while, the box office guys got very wise, and they put a large stack of dollar bills up, kept all the 10s and the 5s, and he'd always grab the large stack, so he only grabbed dollar bills. This is before credit cards. And this was the self-destruction. This was his own theater he was doing that to. So he did have that element, and this also happened with the trip to South America, where there was tragedy, drownings, and all that. Right. Pictures he didn't finish, you know, the Magnificent Ambersons, Robert Wise had to finish and was criticized for the way he shot what he did, which he should not have been. He should not have been. And cut it and all that. But with Orson, you had a gigantic talent, and there were contradictions to its execution.